You've been studying Spanish for 8 months. You can conjugate the preterite. You know the difference between ser and estar. You've memorized the subjunctive mood triggers. But when someone asks you a simple question in Spanish, you freeze. Your mouth opens and nothing comes out. Or worse, you start mentally conjugating verbs while they're standing there waiting for an answer. Here is the uncomfortable truth. You've been lied to about how languages work. Not by bad people, just by a system that feels productive but produces the opposite of what you actually want. Because grammar, the thing you've been grinding on for months, is not how your brain learns to speak. It's a result of learning to speak, not a prerequisite for it. And once you understand why, everything changes. Let me show you what I mean. Picture this. It's 1982. A linguistics researcher named Stephen Krashen walks into a room full of language teachers and says something that sounds insane. He tells them that studying grammar rules doesn't help you acquire language, that all those conjugation charts, all those exercises filling in the blanks with the correct verb form, they're theater. They make you feel like you're learning, but your brain doesn't actually store languages that way. The room erupts. Because if Krashen is right, then the decades of textbooks, curriculums, and teaching methods are built on a foundation of sand. But here's the thing, Krashen was right, and the evidence has been piling up ever since. Think about how you learned English, or if English isn't your first language, think about how you learned your mother tongue. Did your parents sit you down at the age of 2 and explain subject-verb agreement? Did they quiz you on conditional tenses before you were allowed to ask for juice? No. You just heard English. Thousands and thousands of hours of English. You heard your parents say things like, I'm going to the store, so many times that one day without thinking, you just said it too. You didn't learn the future tense with going to. You acquired it through pattern recognition, through repetition, through context. That's Krashen's input hypothesis in action. Your brain builds grammar automatically when it's exposed to comprehensible patterns again and again and again. Not through memorization, not through conscious rule learning, through exposure. And yet, when we try to learn a second language as adults, we abandon this system completely. We crack open a textbook, we start with chapter 1, present tense conjugations. We memorize, we drill, we test ourselves. And we wonder why, after months of doing this, we still can't hold a 30-second conversation. Here's why. When you study a grammar rule, you're storing it in your explicit memory, the part of your brain that handles facts you have to consciously recall, like the capital of Peru or your friend's phone number. But when you speak, you're drawing from implicit memory, the part that handles automatic processes, like walking or catching a ball or saying, I'm going to the store, without constructing the sentence word by word in your head. Grammar study puts information in the wrong filing cabinet, and there's something even more insidious happening. Studying grammar gives you the illusion of control. You sit there with your verb charts, highlighting, taking notes, and it feels productive. It feels like progress. Because you're checking boxes, you're completing lessons, you're getting things right on quizzes. But fluency isn't about the right things on quizzes. It's about automatic access to language in real time. And that requires a completely different approach. So what should you study instead? Before I answer that, I want to tell you about something that happened to me when I was learning Mandarin. I've been doing about 3 hours of input per day, just listening for about 6 months. I hadn't studied a single grammar rule, not one. I didn't know the names of any tenses, I couldn't explain the sentence structure, but one day I was talking with my fiance's family and I wanted to say, I've already eaten. And without thinking, I said, 我已经吃了. Perfect, correct, automatic. I hadn't studied the le particle. I hadn't memorized when to use 已经. I just heard that pattern hundreds and hundreds of times in context. My brain had figured it out. And when I needed it, it was just there. That's how grammar is actually supposed to work. It's not something you learn before you speak. The rules crystallize in your mind through repeated exposure to meaningful patterns. Now, I know what you're thinking. Okay, but I can't just absorb grammar by osmosis. I need structure. I need to know what I'm doing. And you're right. Sort of. You do need structure, but you do not need the structure that you think. Instead of studying grammar rules, study patterns. Instead of memorizing conjugations, learn high-frequency chunks, phrases you can pull apart and reassemble dynamically. Here's what this looks like in practice. Let's say you're learning Spanish and you keep hearing me gustaría. You don't need to know that it's the conditional form of gustar. You just need to notice that native speakers say me gustaría when they want to say something politely. So you start saying it. Me gustaría un café. Me gustaría saber más. You're using the structure. You're absorbing it how it works in context, and eventually your brain will map the underlying rule without you having to consciously study it. This is actually what's called sentence mining. You pull sentences from native content, shows, podcasts, books, whatever you like, and you practice from them. You're not analyzing them per se, you're using them. Your brain does the analysis in the background, automatically. the same way it did when you were 2 years old. And here's the funny thing. When you approach language this way, you're not just learning faster, you are learning differently. Because instead of trying to consciously construct sentences using rules, you're developing intuition. You start to feel what sounds right, just like native speakers do. Native speakers don't conjugate verbs in their heads. They don't think, okay, third person singular, present tense, so add an S. They just know he goes sounds right and he go doesn't. That's the level you want to reach. And you can't get there by studying grammar charts. You get there by hearing and using the language so many times that patterns just become automatic. So as always, here is your action plan. 3 things you should do instead of studying grammar. First, consume massive amounts of comprehensible input. Find content in your target language you can understand about 80 to 90% of. Could be YouTube videos for learners, could be kids shows, could be podcasts with transcripts, doesn't matter. You've heard me say this before, but just make sure you understand most of it and consume hours of it. This is how your brain learns to recognize patterns. Second, sentence mind. When you hear a sentence structure that shows up a lot, write it down. Practice saying it, swap out words. If you hear, I want to go, practice, I want to eat, I want to learn, I want to try. You're training your brain to manipulate the structure, not just memorize one frozen phrase. Third, speak often, even if it's messy. Don't wait until you feel like you've learned all the grammar, because honestly, you never will. Native speakers spend their entire lives absorbing new patterns. Start speaking with the chunks and patterns you already have. Your brain will fill in the gaps as you go and as you progress. Grammar will come, I promise. But it'll come as a result of input and use, not as a prerequisite. I spent months with a Japanese tutor who charged me $150 to $200 per session. She explained grammar rules, assigned homework, quizzed me, and I hated every second of it. I never did the homework, I usually dreaded the lessons, and I quit. Because the system, no matter how good it was, didn't work for me. Then I switched to pure comprehensible input, well, supplemented with some Anki. I watched hundreds of hours of Japanese YouTube, I sentence mined, I didn't study grammar for an entire year. And when I finally had my first real conversation, the tutor was shocked. She said, "This is your first time speaking?" Because I sounded like someone who had been already practicing for months. But I hadn't been practicing speaking. I had been building a foundation of pattern. And when it was time to speak, it wasn't perfect, but it flowed. This is what I want for you. I want you to stop wasting time on conjugation drills and start feeding your brain the raw material it actually needs. Patterns, context, repetition. Let your brain do what it's designed to do. Recognize, internalize, and eventually automate. Because fluency isn't just about knowing the rules. It's about not needing to think about them. If you're ready to stop spinning your wheels on grammar and start building real conversational fluency, I've put together a complete roadmap. If you want it, it's in the link in the description. I personally work with people to help them become conversationally fluent in a new language in 200 days using the exact system that I just described. No grammar drills, no memorization, just comprehensible input, pattern recognition, and consistent practice. I encourage you to check it out. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.